The headlights came fast, too fast. Rain hammered the asphalt like 1,000 angry fists, turning the street into a black mirror that swallowed sound. A silver sedan fishtailed through the intersection, tires screaming against the wet pavement. And standing in the middle of the crosswalk, frozen like a deer caught in destiny's trap, was a young woman in a lilac coat. She wasn't screaming, wasn't running, just standing there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like someone watching a movie they couldn't hear. Caleb Torrance dropped his mop bucket. His son Micah was asleep on his shoulder, dead weight after another long night waiting in the academy break room. But something in Caleb's chest kicked hard, that old instinct from his Marine days, the one that said move now, think later. He ran. The world slowed down to heartbeats and headlights. His boots splashed through puddles, his arms burning as he shifted Micah to one side and reached for the stranger with the other. The car horn blared, one long, desperate note that split the night in half. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Caleb's hand closed around her waist. He yanked hard, throwing both their bodies toward the curb. The sedan's bumper kissed the air where she'd been standing half a second earlier, so close he felt the heat from the engine on his neck. They hit the sidewalk together, hard. His shoulder cracked against concrete. Pain exploded down his arm like lightning in reverse. But she was breathing. The car didn't stop, just kept going, red taillights disappearing into the rain like guilty secrets. Caleb lay there for a moment, chest heaving, rain soaking through his janitor's uniform. Micah stirred against him, confused but unhurt. The woman rolled onto her side, gasping. Her phone shattered on the pavement beside them in a spider web of broken glass. She looked at him, really looked at him, and her lips moved. No sound came out, just shapes. Words he couldn't hear because she wasn't making them. That's when he understood. She was deaf. Her hands came up, trembling, signing something fast and desperate. Caleb knew maybe 10 signs from a community class his late wife had dragged him to years ago. He managed one, okay? She nodded, tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. Then she grabbed his wrist, not rough, but urgent, and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. Her eyes said what her voice couldn't. Thank you. You saved me. I felt your heartbeat and knew I wasn't alone. A car slowed nearby, someone shouting if they needed help. Caleb waved them off, trying to catch his breath. The woman fumbled for her phone, realized it was dead, then pulled a crumpled receipt from her coat pocket. She scribbled something with a pen that barely worked, ink bleeding through the wet paper. Sienna Vale, and a phone number that smudged before he could read it all. She pressed it into his palm, squeezed once, then stood on shaky legs. Before he could say anything, before he could ask if she was really okay, if she needed a hospital, if she had someone to call, she was gone. Just walked into the rain like a ghost who'd borrowed a body for 5 minutes. Micah's voice cut through the silence. Daddy, why didn't she say thank you with her mouth? Caleb stared at the ruined paper in his hand, at the name he'd never forget. Because some people talk with their hearts, son, and sometimes that's louder than words. He didn't know it yet, but saving Sienna Vale's life would cost him everything he thought he understood about worth, justice, and the invisible lines that separate people who scrub floors from people who own them. What would you do if saving someone's life made you the villain in someone else's story? Sienna Vale stood at a podium she never wanted to touch. The auditorium was packed, teachers in pressed suits, students in designer uniforms, parents who drove cars worth more than most people's houses. Microphones caught every breath. Cameras blinked red from 3 angles. Her father sat in the front row, stone-faced, hands folded like a man attending a funeral he didn't approve of. She hated public speaking, hated the way people stared at her mouth, waiting for mistakes, hated the interpreter standing beside her, translating her signs into a voice that wasn't hers. But some things couldn't stay silent. Her hands moved slow, deliberate. The interpreter's voice followed like an echo. Yesterday, I met someone who reminded me that kindness doesn't need a title. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Her father's jaw tightened. He saved my life. He's a single father who works right here, unseen, unheard, unappreciated. His name is Caleb Torrance. Gasps. Confusion. 100 heads turning, searching for a face they'd never bothered to notice. Sienna's hands didn't stop. Today, I'm announcing something my father doesn't know about yet. The room went ice cold. Douglas Vale leaned forward, eyes narrowing. I'm donating a quarter of my trust fund to launch the Torrance Scholarship, so kids like his son, Micah, can study here too. Because if this school can't see the value in a man who risks everything for a stranger, then maybe we need to redefine what excellence actually means. The auditorium erupted. Some applauded. Some whispered scandalized theories. Someone in the back row actually gasped loud enough to be heard over the noise. And in the corner, near the stage door, a janitor in a faded blue uniform stood frozen, mop still in hand, looking at Sienna like she'd just rewritten gravity. But that moment, that beautiful, terrible moment, was still 24 hours away. Right now, Caleb Torrance didn't know his name would be spoken into microphones. Didn't know his life was about to split into before and after. Right now, he was just a man with a bandaged arm, limping into work, hoping nobody noticed. Could one act of courage really change two lives forever? Or would the world crush them both for daring to believe it could? The apartment smelled like burnt toast and broken promises. Caleb stood at the kitchen counter, spreading peanut butter on bread with his good arm. His left shoulder screamed every time he moved, but he'd learned to ignore pain the same way he'd learned to ignore the water stain on the ceiling that looked like Texas. Micah sat at the table, coloring a superhero with a yellow cape and overalls. The crayon box had 8 colors left. 2 were broken in half. Dad, does saving people hurt? Caleb paused mid-spread. Sometimes. Then why do it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Caleb looked at his son, 7 years old, eyes too wise for his age, wearing a shirt 2 sizes too big because thrift stores don't care about perfect fits. Because the hurt goes away, Caleb said quietly. But the regret of not trying? That stays forever. Micah nodded like that made perfect sense. Then he held up his drawing. This is you. Captain Mop. He fights dirt and saves people who can't hear danger coming. Something cracked inside Caleb's chest. Not painful, but close. He ruffled Micah's hair. Finish your breakfast. We leave in 10. They walked to Glenford Academy like they did every morning. 6 blocks through a neighborhood where BMWs didn't slow down and joggers crossed the street when they saw Caleb's uniform. The school rose ahead like a castle made of privilege, brick walls, iron gates, a parking lot that looked like a luxury car commercial. Caleb clocked in at the service entrance. The break room smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. He grabbed his card, checked his supplies, and headed for the main hall. That's when he heard the laughter. 2 teachers stood near the lockers, voices low but sharp enough to carry. Did you hear? Mr. Vale's daughter was almost hit last night. Some janitor yanked her into the street like a crazy person, probably looking for a lawsuit. You know how those people are. Caleb kept walking, eyes forward, mop in hand, like he'd learned to do every time the world reminded him he was invisible. But his grip on the mop handle was tight enough to leave marks. He didn't know that in less than an hour, the black SUV pulling into the parking lot would carry the man who funded this school, the daughter who couldn't forget his face, and a reckoning that would make everyone who ever called him nobody choke on their own words. How much humiliation can one man endure before the universe decides to balance the scales? The silver sedan came out of nowhere. Caleb's mind was still on Micah, on getting home, on whether the rent check would clear this month. Rain hammered the pavement so hard it bounced back up, turning the street into a war zone of water and light. His shift had run late, again. The academy's floors didn't clean themselves, and rich kids didn't care how much mud they tracked in. Micah was draped over his shoulder, small and warm and trusting. 7 years old and already too used to waiting in break rooms, too familiar with the phrase, just 5 more minutes, buddy. Then Caleb saw her. A young woman stood in the crosswalk like someone paused mid-thought. Lilac coat soaked through, hair plastered to her face, and her eyes, wide, empty of panic, just blank. Like she didn't realize the car was coming. Like she couldn't hear the engine roaring, the tires hydroplaning, the horn blaring. Because she couldn't. The realization hit Caleb the same second his feet started moving. He didn't think, didn't calculate, just shifted Micah to his left side and sprinted toward the stranger with his right arm outstretched. The world compressed into fragments, rain stinging his eyes, his boots hammering wet asphalt, the sedan's headlights painting everything white and holy and wrong. The woman's face turned toward him, finally registering movement, but too late, too slow. Caleb's hand closed around her waist. He yanked her sideways with everything he had, throwing both their bodies toward the curb. Time stretched like taffy. He felt the car's heat on his neck, smelled burning brake pads, heard Micah's confused whimper against his chest. They hit the sidewalk hard. His shoulder took the impact first, concrete unforgiving, bone meeting stone with a crack that echoed inside his skull. Pain detonated down his arm, bright and sharp and total. The woman landed on top of him, gasping, her elbow digging into his ribs. Micah cried out, scared but unhurt, clutching Caleb's collar. The sedan never stopped, just kept going, taillights vanishing into the rain like a murderer fleeing the scene. Caleb lay there, lungs burning, shoulder screaming. Rain pounded his face. The woman rolled off him, scrambling to her knees, her phone skittering across the pavement, screen splintering into 1,000 cracks. She looked at him, really looked. Her lips moved, shaping words her voice didn't make. Her hands came up, trembling, signing something desperate and fast. Caleb's mind reached back to a community center class his wife had dragged him to 5 years ago. Before the accident, before everything turned gray, he managed one clumsy sign. Okay? She nodded, tears mixed with rain. Then she did something that would replay in Caleb's mind for weeks. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart, and held it there. Her eyes said what her mouth couldn't. I felt you. I felt your heartbeat. I wasn't alone. A passing car slowed, someone shouting offers of help. Caleb waved them off, trying to sit up. His shoulder was on fire. Micah clung to him, wide-eyed. The woman fumbled for her phone, realized it was dead, then pulled a crumpled receipt from her coat. Her pen barely worked, ink bleeding through the wet paper. She scribbled something, pressed it into Caleb's hand, squeezed once, then stood on shaky legs and walked into the rain. Just like that. Gone. Caleb stared at the ruined paper. Sienna Vale and a phone number smudged beyond recognition. Micah's voice was small. Daddy, why didn't she say thank you? Caleb tucked the paper into his pocket, ignoring the pain shooting through his arm. Because some people talk louder without words, son. He didn't know that saving Sienna Vale would cost him more than a dislocated shoulder. Didn't know her last name carried weight that could crush him or lift him, depending on who was watching. What happens when the person you save can't forget you, but the world wishes you'd stayed invisible? The bandage on Caleb's arm drew stares like blood and water. He clocked in at 6:30, same as always, moving through the service entrance with his head down and his cart rattling. The shoulder still burned, probably dislocated, maybe cracked, definitely not something he could afford to get checked at a hospital. He'd wrapped it tight, popped 3 ibuprofen, and decided pain was just another bill he couldn't pay. The break room was empty except for Marcus, the overnight security guard, pouring burnt coffee into a styrofoam cup. You look like hell, Torrance. Feel worse. Caleb grabbed his cleaning supplies, checking the list. Main hall, classrooms, gymnasium. The usual invisible labor that kept the academy looking pristine for people who'd never notice. Heard some drama went down last night, Marcus said, not looking up. Vale girl almost got hit by a car. Word is some janitor pulled her out of the street. Caleb's hand tightened on the mop handle. That right? Yeah. Supervisor's pissed, saying whoever did it overstepped. Could have gotten the school sued. The words landed like fists. Caleb didn't respond. Just pushed his cart into the hall, shoulders tight, jaw locked. The academy was already buzzing, students flowing through the front doors in designer backpacks, teachers clutching lattes, everyone moving like they owned the air they breathed. That's when he heard them. 2 teachers stood near the trophy case, voices low but sharp enough to cut. Mrs. Pemberton, English department, drove a Tesla, always smiled at parents and ignored janitors. And Mr. Hayes, history teacher, bow tie, the kind of man who said irregardless and thought it sounded smart. Did you hear about Douglas Vale's daughter? Pemberton whispered. Some nobody janitor dragged her out of the street last night. She could have been injured. Hayes snorted, probably hoping for a reward. You know how these people think. Exactly. Next thing you know, he'll be filing a lawsuit for emotional distress or some nonsense. They laughed. Not loud. Just enough. Caleb kept mopping. Eyes down. Breathing steady. He'd learned this dance years ago. The one where you pretend you don't have ears, don't have feelings, don't exist as anything more than a function. But his knuckles were white on the mop handle. An hour later, The intercom crackled. Caleb Torrance, report to the supervisor's office immediately. The hall went quiet. A few students looked up. Most didn't. Caleb abandoned his cart and walked to the administrative wing, each step heavier than the last. Mr. Radnor's office smelled like leather and arrogance. The man sat behind a desk that cost more than Caleb's car, fingers steepled, expression somewhere between bored and annoyed. Sit. Caleb didn't. You needed something, sir? Radnor's smile was thin as paper. I heard about your little heroics last night. Let me be clear. You're lucky Mr. Vale isn't pressing charges for unauthorized physical contact with his daughter. The room tilted. Charges. You grabbed her. Pulled her. In some jurisdictions, that's assault. Radnor leaned back, enjoying this. Do your job, Torrance. Clean floors. Empty trash. Stay out of situations that don't concern you. Understood. Caleb's jaw worked. His shoulder throbbed. Understood. Good. Because the last thing this academy needs is some janitor thinking he's a hero. Radnor waved him away like dismissing a servant. That'll be all. Caleb walked out, chest tight, hands shaking. He made it to the supply closet before he had to stop, lean against the wall, and breathe through the rage burning in his throat. That night, he told Micah what happened. The boy looked up from his drawing, confused. Why would helping someone be bad, Dad? Caleb didn't have an answer. But across town, in a mansion with gates and security cameras, Sienna Vale sat at her bedroom window, holding a crumpled receipt with a name she couldn't stop thinking about. And tomorrow, she'd make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man Caleb Torrance was. When the system calls you a villain for saving a life, how do you prove you're the hero without losing everything in the process? The black SUV rolled into the parking lot like a judge arriving at sentencing. Caleb was mopping the main hall when he heard it. The shift in air pressure, the sudden hush that fell over students and teachers alike. Everyone stopped. Everyone turned. Car doors opened with that expensive thunk sound cheap cars never make. Douglas Vale stepped out first. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than Caleb's yearly salary. The kind of man who didn't walk, he occupied space, claimed it, made everyone else feel like guests in a room he owned. Behind him came Sienna, in that same lilac coat, moving with careful grace, eyes scanning the crowd. Caleb's stomach dropped. Mr. Radnor appeared instantly, smoothing his tie, stretching his face into a smile that looked painful. Mr. Vale, what an unexpected honor. We weren't expecting. I know. Vale's voice was cold, efficient. My daughter insisted we come. Something about thanking the staff. Sienna's eyes swept the hall, past the trophy cases, past the gathered teachers, landing squarely on Caleb, frozen mid-mop, 20 feet away. Recognition flashed across her face like lightning. Her hands moved fast, signing something urgent to her father. Vale's expression hardened. He turned, following her gaze, and his eyes found Caleb with the precision of a targeting system. You. The word cut through the hall like a blade. You're the janitor? Every head swiveled. Caleb felt 100 eyes lock onto him at once. His throat went dry. Yes, sir. Vale crossed the distance in 4 strides. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Jaw tight, eyes sharp enough to draw blood. I heard you interfered last night. Grabbed my daughter without permission. The hall went silent. Not the comfortable silence of concentration. The suffocating silence of scandal. She was in danger, sir. The car. I don't need your excuses. Vale's voice was flat, final. I appreciate the intention, but let's not make this a spectacle. My daughter's fine. That's all that matters. We're here to thank the staff in general, not single out one employee for doing what anyone should have done. The dismissal was clear. Caleb felt heat crawl up his neck. He nodded once, gripping his mop tighter. But Sienna wasn't nodding. She stomped her foot, hard, against the polished floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Her hands flew, signing fast and furious. Her face flushed with anger her father couldn't ignore. Vale's jaw clenched. Sienna, not here. She signed harder, more aggressive, pointing at Caleb, at her father, at the crowd of teachers pretending not to stare. An interpreter materialized from somewhere, a young woman with nervous eyes who cleared her throat. She says you're wrong, that he didn't interfere. He saved her, that she was frozen and the car would have killed her if he hadn't. That's enough, Vale snapped. But Sienna wasn't finished. She pulled out a small notepad from her coat. the same kind she'd used last night, and scribbled something with sharp, angry strokes. She crossed the space between her and Caleb in 3 steps and shoved the paper into his hand. Caleb looked down. The handwriting was clean, deliberate, unmistakable. You risked your life for me. I won't forget that. Tomorrow. Building C, 3 p.m. His eyes shot back up. Sienna's gaze held his, fierce, determined, burning with something between gratitude and defiance. She signed one more phrase, slow enough that even Caleb recognized it from memory. Thank you. Then she turned on her heel and walked back to her father, head high, shoulders squared. Vale's face had gone pale, then red, then carefully blank. He glanced at Caleb once, a look that promised consequences, then guided Sienna toward the exit with a firm hand on her shoulder. The SUV left the same way it came. Fast. Final. The hall exploded into whispers the second the doors closed. Caleb stood there, note crumpled in his fist, heart hammering against his ribs. Teachers stared. Students whispered. Mr. Radner's expression was murderous. Marcus appeared at his elbow, voice low. Brother, I don't know what you just walked into, but you better watch your back. Caleb looked down at the note again. Building C, 3 p.m. He had no idea what waited for him there, but something told him showing up would either save his life or destroy it. When a millionaire's daughter refuses to let you disappear, do you step into the spotlight or run before it burns you alive? Caleb almost didn't go. He stood outside Building C at 2:58, stomach churning, note folded in his pocket like evidence he couldn't destroy. The building was quiet. Administrative offices, mostly empty this time of day. Through the glass doors, he could see polished floors reflecting fluorescent lights. Micah was safe in the break room with Marcus, coloring another superhero. Captain Mop version 2.0, this time with a cape made of cleaning rags. The kid had looked up when Caleb stood to leave, eyes too knowing. You gonna be okay, Dad? Always am, buddy. But standing here now, Caleb wasn't sure. What did Sienna want? An apology for embarrassing her father? A private thank you she could check off her conscience? Maybe she'd hand him a check, guilt money wrapped in gratitude, and expect him to disappear quietly. Rich people loved making problems go away with money. His hand hovered over the door handle. He could turn around, pretend he never got the note, go back to being invisible, safe, unnoticed. That's what smart people did. That's what survivors did. But then he thought about Micah's question from breakfast. Why would helping someone be bad, Dad? And he thought about Sienna's hand pressed against his chest in the rain, feeling his heartbeat like proof she was still alive. Caleb pulled the door open. The hallway smelled like expensive carpet cleaner and power. His boots squeaked on the tile. He followed the room numbers until he found the conference room Sienna had scribbled on the back of the note. The door was cracked open. Voices leaked through, muffled, tense. This is reckless, Sienna. You don't owe him anything. That was Vale's voice. Sharp, controlled anger. A pause. Then the interpreter's voice, translating Sienna's signs. I owe him my life. And I'm tired of pretending gratitude is something to be ashamed of. He's a janitor. He's a human being. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. If you do this, there will be consequences. People will talk. They'll say you're naive, that he manipulated you, that this is some kind of. Let them talk. Another pause. Then Vale's voice, quieter now, almost pleading. Sienna, please. Think about what this means. For you. For us. I have thought about it. For 24 hours, I've thought about nothing else. And I'm doing this. Caleb knocked before he could talk himself out of it. The voices stopped. Footsteps. The door swung open. Sienna stood there, eyes red-rimmed but steady. Behind her, Vale sat at a conference table, hands folded, expression carved from stone. An interpreter stood in the corner, nervous. And beside Vale sat a woman Caleb didn't recognize. Lawyer, maybe, or publicist, someone whose job was protecting rich people from their own humanity. Sienna signed something. The interpreter translated. Thank you for coming. Caleb nodded, throat tight. Ma'am, if this is about last night, I didn't mean to. She held up a hand. Signed fast. The interpreter spoke. You saved my life. Everything after that is my choice, not yours. I asked you here because tomorrow, I'm making an announcement. And I wanted you to hear it first. Vale's chair scraped back. Sienna, don't. She ignored him. Her hands kept moving. Tomorrow, in front of the entire school, I'm establishing a scholarship fund in your name. The Torrance Scholarship. For students whose parents work here but can't afford tuition. The room tilted. Caleb grabbed the doorframe. What? Starting with your son, Micah. His vision blurred. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't process. Why? Sienna's eyes held his. She signed slowly, deliberately, each motion clear as glass. Because kindness without recognition is theft. And I won't let the world steal your dignity. Bill stood, face dark. This conversation is over. But Sienna was already pulling out another note, pressing it into Caleb's hand. This one had a time, a date, a location, the main auditorium. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She signed one last thing before her father could drag her away. Be there. Caleb stood alone in the hallway, note trembling in his hand, heart hammering so loud he couldn't hear his own thoughts. Tomorrow, his name would be spoken into microphones. Tomorrow, the world would see him. Tomorrow, everything would change. When someone refuses to let you stay invisible, are you brave enough to be seen? The auditorium was packed. Caleb stood in the back, pressed against the wall like he could disappear into it. Teachers filled the front rows. Pemberton, Hayes, Radner, all of them in their best outfits, hair perfect, smiles frozen. Students packed the middle section, whispering, phones half hidden. Parents lined the sides, checking watches, wondering why they'd been called here. And at the front, on the stage, stood a podium with a microphone that looked like a guillotine. Douglas Vale sat in the front row, spine straight, face unreadable. Beside him, empty chairs for board members who'd been summoned last minute. The air felt electric, dangerous, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then Sienna walked onto the stage. She wore a white dress, simple, elegant, the kind that made every eye in the room follow her. Her hands were steady. Her chin was up. The interpreter took position beside her, and the room fell silent. Sienna's hands began to move. Thank you for coming. The interpreter's voice filled the space. I know this is unexpected, but some things can't wait for scheduled meetings and polite timing. A rustle of confusion. Vale's jaw tightened. Yesterday, someone I didn't know risked everything to save me. Not because he hoped for a reward. Not because he wanted recognition. Because it was right. Sienna's eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Caleb in the back. Half the room turned to follow her gaze. His name is Caleb Torrance. He's a single father who works here as a janitor. He has a son named Micah who waits in the break room every night, drawing superheroes while his dad cleans classrooms his family could never afford. Gasps. Whispers. Radner's face went pale. And yesterday, when I froze in the street, when a car came fast and I couldn't hear it, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed me, saved me, injured himself doing it. Then he went home, bandaged his shoulder, and came to work the next day without telling anyone. The room was breathless now. Parents leaning forward. Students filming on hidden phones. This morning, I found out that his supervisor reprimanded him for helping me. Said he overstepped. That he should have stayed in his place. All eyes swung to Radner. The man looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. So today, I'm making an announcement my father didn't approve. Vale flinched. I'm donating 1/4 of my trust fund, $8 million, to establish the Torrance Scholarship. Starting with Micah, this fund will provide full tuition for children of academy staff who can't afford to attend. The auditorium erupted. Applause, shock, chaos. Teachers on their feet. Students cheering. Parents stunned into silence. Sienna wasn't finished. Her hands kept moving, sharper now, more urgent. Because if this school, if any institution, can't see the value in a man who risks himself for a stranger, then we're not teaching excellence. We're teaching classism. And I refuse to be part of that. The interpreter's voice cracked on the last word. Sienna turned, looking directly at Caleb. Her hands signed one final message, and the interpreter spoke it loud enough for everyone to hear. Mr. Torrance, thank you for teaching me what true character looks like. I hope one day I'm half as brave as you. Then she stepped away from the microphone and walked off the stage, head high, leaving behind an auditorium full of people who'd never look at a janitor the same way again. Caleb couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. Teachers approached him, apologizing, shaking his hand. Students asked for photos. Parents thanked him for showing their kids what real heroism looks like. But all Caleb could see was Sienna, standing near the exit with her father, and Vale's expression, no longer stone, but something softer. something almost like respect. The man crossed the room slowly, deliberately. When he reached Caleb, he extended his hand. I misjudged you, Vale said quietly. Most men wouldn't have done what you did. My daughter sees something in you I almost missed. Thank you. Caleb shook his hand, throat too tight for words. And in the break room, watching on someone's live stream, Micah jumped up and down, shouting, That's my dad. That's Captain Mop. What happens when the world finally sees you and decides you were worth seeing all along? The job offer came on a Tuesday. Caleb sat in Vale's office. Actual office, not a closet with a desk, staring at a contract he couldn't quite believe was real. Maintenance director. Full benefits. Salary that made his throat close up. An office with his name on the door. Douglas Vale sat across from him, fingers steepled, expression thoughtful. You earned this. Not because of Sienna. Because in 24 hours, you showed more integrity than most men show in a lifetime. Caleb's hand hovered over the pen. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Your son deserves a father who doesn't work himself to death. And this academy deserves leadership that understands what service actually means. The pen felt heavy, like signing would change everything. Make all of this real, permanent, undeniable. Caleb signed. Vale smiled, genuine, warm, the first real smile Caleb had ever seen from the man. Welcome aboard, Director Torrance. The title felt foreign, like wearing someone else's jacket. That afternoon, Caleb walked Micah through the academy as a student, not a visitor. The boy carried a backpack with actual school supplies, not hand-me-downs. Wore a uniform that fit. Walked through halls where other kids smiled and said hello. Dad, is this real? Micah whispered. Caleb squeezed his shoulder. Yeah, buddy. This is real. They passed the janitor's closet where Caleb used to keep his cart. Someone else worked there now, a young guy, new, looking overwhelmed. Caleb stopped, knocked on the doorframe. Need any help? The guy looked up, startled. You're the Torrance scholarship guy. I'm just Caleb, and I remember what it's like starting out. You need anything, you come find me. Got it. The young janitor's eyes went bright. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Walking away, Micah tugged Caleb's hand. Why'd you do that? Because somebody helped me once. And the best way to say thank you is to pass it forward. That evening, Caleb returned to his apartment for the last time. Vale had arranged housing. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen where the stove didn't spark when you turned it on. Micah ran through the rooms, laughing, claiming the bigger bedroom before Caleb could argue. There was a knock at the door. Sienna stood outside, hands in her coat pockets, small smile on her face. She signed hello. Caleb signed back, still clumsy, but learning. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. Some people think thank you is enough. It's not. You gave me my life back. So I'm giving you yours. Not as charity, as justice. Because you deserve to be seen long before I needed saving. Keep being the man who runs toward danger when everyone else runs away. The world needs more Captain Mops. Caleb's vision blurred. He looked up. Sienna was smiling, tears on her cheeks. He signed thank you, the one phrase he knew perfectly now. She signed back, no, thank you. Then she left, disappearing into the evening like the night they met. Except this time, neither of them was running from anything. Caleb stood in the doorway of his new home, Micah coloring at the kitchen table, the smell of actual dinner cooking on the stove, and for the first time in 6 years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. When grace catches you falling, do you stay down, or do you rise and reach for someone else? 6 months later, Caleb stood in the academy's main hall, watching students flood through doors he used to clean. Micah walked among them now, backpack on, friends laughing beside him, belonging in a way Caleb never thought possible. The Torrance Scholarship had funded 12 kids so far. Children of cafeteria workers, security guards, groundskeepers. Kids who'd grown up invisible, now walking visible. Mr. Radner had resigned quietly. No scandal, no drama. Just left one Friday and never came back. Rumor was Vale had given him a choice. Leave with dignity or be fired without it. Pemberton and Hayes still taught here, but they didn't laugh in hallways anymore. Didn't whisper about janitors or make jokes about people beneath them. They nodded at Caleb in meetings now. Called him Director Torrance. Meant it. Caleb's office had a window, a desk that didn't wobble, photos of Micah taped to the wall. And every morning, before the students arrived, He still walked the halls with a mop, not because he had to, but because he refused to forget where he came from. Sienna visited sometimes, brought Micah books, signed stories with him, taught Caleb new phrases in sign language. She was studying education now, planning to teach deaf students, to be the advocate she'd needed growing up. "You inspired me," she'd signed once. Caleb had signed back, clumsy but earnest. "You saved me first." Today, a new janitor started, a woman named Tamara, single mom, 2 kids, eyes full of hope and exhaustion Caleb recognized instantly. He met her in the supply room, showed her the ropes, made sure she knew where the break room was, where her kids could wait safely. "Mr. Torrance," she said nervously, "I heard what happened. With you and Miss Vale. Is it true?" Caleb smiled. "Every word." "Do you think?" She hesitated. "Do you think good things can really happen to people like us?" He thought about rain and headlights, about a girl who couldn't hear danger coming, about a son who drew superheroes in overalls, about the moment everything changed because someone refused to let him stay invisible. "I think good things happen when good people refuse to give up," Caleb said. "And I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Her eyes went bright. That night, Caleb tucked Micah into bed, actual bed, with sheets that matched, in a room that stayed warm all winter. The boy clutched a drawing he'd made in art class. Captain Mop, version 10, now with a whole team of heroes behind him. "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I'm proud of you." Caleb's throat closed. He kissed his son's forehead. "I'm proud of you too, buddy. Because I'm smart. Because you're kind. And that's harder." Micah smiled, eyes drifting closed. Caleb watched him for a long moment. This boy who'd waited in break rooms and never complained, who'd believed in superheroes when the world gave him every reason not to. Then he walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about all the people out there working night shifts and double shifts, invisible but essential, unnoticed but needed. He thought about Sienna's note. "Keep being the man who runs toward danger when everyone else runs away." And he thought about the truth nobody teaches you until you live it. Sometimes, the smallest acts of courage create the biggest earthquakes of change. Somewhere in the city, someone was struggling. Somewhere, someone was invisible. Somewhere, someone was one moment away from giving up. Caleb didn't know their names, didn't know their stories. But he knew this. Tomorrow, he'd keep showing up, keep seeing people others ignored, keep proving that worth isn't measured by paychecks or titles, but by the size of your heart and the risks you take for strangers. Because some heroes wear capes, but the best ones wear overalls and carry mops. And they save the world one act of kindness at a time. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that goodness still exists in unexpected places, then do us a favor, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because we're just getting started. More stories like this are coming, stories that prove humanity isn't lost, just waiting to be noticed. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a time someone saw you when you felt invisible. Tell us about your own Captain Mop moment. Your story might inspire someone who needs it. And remember, you never know when your smallest act of kindness might change someone's entire world. So keep being brave. Keep being kind. Keep showing up. The world needs you more than you know. See you in the next story. And until then, stay inspired.